I never meant to ruin a man's life. Honestly, I barely meant to survive the week. But life has a cruel sense of humor, and apparently, I was standing smack in the middle of it when I found the folder. One folder. One tiny stack of papers that could end a senator's entire career. And for reasons I still can't fully explain, it ended up making me a target one I didn't even know I was signing up for. The first time I noticed him was at the corner of the cafe where I worked nights, brewing too strong coffee for college students who didn't know how bitter the real world tasted yet. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moving in a way that suggested a predator who had learned patience. Black suit, no-nonsense haircut, eyes like steel, the kind of man you notice before you even see him. I didn't know his name, but I would remember that face forever. I spilled coffee on a customer once, and he was there, just a shadow in the background, hands folded, watching. I wanted to tell myself I was imagining things, that paranoia was just part of living in a city that didn't care about anyone. But I wasn't imagining it. He was everywhere. Every time I thought I was alone. Every time I left the cafe and walked through the dim streets toward my cheap apartment, he was there. Always there. At first, I tried to confront him, thinking maybe it was a misunderstanding, maybe he was someone's friend. He didn't answer questions. He didn't even blink when I said his name. Nothing but cold silence and that unflinching gaze that made my skin crawl and my heart thump in a way that was entirely unhelpful. And yet, there was something in his presence that made me feel safe. Ridiculous, I know. Dangerous even. But that's how it began, the push and pull between fear and some unidentifiable pull I didn't want to resist. The first night he really made contact, I didn't know what to expect. My apartment door had been rattled with enough force to convince me that someone of him was trying to break in. Panic clawed at my throat, but before I could grab anything, he was there, blocking the door. Not a word, just that quiet, steady presence that somehow screamed, "You're mine to protect whether you like it or not." I laughed nervously, trying to mask my terror. Thanks." My voice sounded weak even to me. He said nothing. He just stepped closer, hands moving without ceremony to grip my shoulders. The touch was firm, commanding, almost painfully intimate. And then he held me, not gently, not tenderly, but in a way that made it clear this was not optional, this was necessary. I froze. My body ached with confusion and something deeper, something I wasn't ready to name. I wanted to pull away, and at the same time I wanted to lean in. The smell of him cologne sharp with a hint of wood and something darker, something primal made my head spin. "You shouldn't be alone tonight," he said finally, voice low, barely above a whisper. No introduction, no explanation, no asking if I wanted this protection. Just a statement of fact. And I realized, with a sinking thrill, that I had no choice but to accept. The nights blurred after that. He would appear whenever I was in danger and sometimes when I wasn't. My life became a sequence of stolen glances, tense silences, and the strange comfort of his near-constant shadow. There was danger everywhere, and yet, wrapped in his presence, I felt more alive than I had ever felt alone. We spoke very little. His words were measured, calculated, and infrequent. But his eyes, they spoke volumes. Sometimes I caught a softness there, fleeting, like sunlight through a crack in a stormy sky. Sometimes it was ice, warning me not to cross him. And sometimes it was hunger. I knew the stakes. Every document I had meant my death if mishandled. Every glance he gave me meant he had decided whether I would live through the night. And yet, each touch, each protective gesture, built a bridge between us that was stronger than fear. One night I tried to test him. I left my apartment deliberately late, walking the empty streets with a sense of reckless defiance. I wanted to see if he would follow. My heart raced not just from fear, but from anticipation. And of course he was there, always there, standing in the shadows, watching me with those steel-gray eyes that somehow penetrated right through my facade. "You shouldn't be here," he said simply. And then he stepped into the light, blocking my path in the most cinematic, impossible way. I could see the tension in his body, the barely restrained force in the way he stood, like a coiled spring ready to snap. But there was also something else, a softness that made my knees feel weak and my chest ache. "I'm not afraid," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Lies, lies, pure lies." He didn't move closer immediately. Instead, he let the words hang in the air, weighing them, testing me. And then, almost imperceptibly, he leaned in, pressing a hand to my cheek, tilting my face up to meet his gaze. "Fear is necessary," he said, "but so is trust." The touch was electric. My body responded before my brain could process anything. And in that instant, I realized I was utterly, irrevocably lost. Lost to him, lost to the danger, lost to a world that seemed to shrink until it was just the two of us, standing in the twilight, hearts hammering, skin on the verge of fire. Weeks passed like this, nights filled with unspoken tension, days filled with the invisible threat of the senator's wrath. I learned to read his movements, to understand the subtle ways he communicated. A tilt of the head, a narrowed gaze, a hand that lingered on my shoulder just a moment too long, and I found myself craving it, needing it, despite the fear that clawed at my consciousness. He was cold, yes, methodical, lethal, but he was also human. In rare, fleeting moments, I caught glimpses of something vulnerable, something that made me want to reach out and touch him, not just for comfort, but to connect, to anchor him as he anchored me. The paradox of it all made my heart ache. He was my captor and my guardian, my threat and my sanctuary. And somewhere between the danger and the intimacy, I realized that this story wasn't just about corruption or power or survival. It was about something far more dangerous and far more beautiful: love. And so it began, this strange, impossible dance between a man I feared and a man I wanted more than I had ever wanted anything else. Nights of peril, days of uncertainty, and moments of raw, undeniable connection. A story written not in words, but in glances, in touches, in the electricity that sparked between us when we were forced together by circumstance and choice. Every night he held me, not out of desire, at least not entirely, but because it was necessary. Because the world was cruel, because people were dangerous, because I had stumbled into something far bigger than myself. And every night, I realized that in his arms, I was alive in a way I had never been before. I didn't know how long this would last. I didn't know if we would survive the senator's wrath, the public scrutiny, the relentless tension that hung over every interaction. But I knew one thing. In the darkness, in the uncertainty, in the fear and the closeness, we had found something that was ours alone. Something no one could take away. Something that made the world make sense, if only for a few stolen moments. And in the quiet, when the city slept and the danger slumbered just out of reach, I allowed myself to dream. Dream of a life where fear was replaced by trust, where danger was replaced by love, and where the man who haunted my nights was also the one who held my heart. The following weeks became a blur of shadows and whispers. The senator's corruption wasn't just a secret, it was a ticking time bomb, and I had become the fuse. Every document I carried, every contact I made, every careless word could tip the scale and make me a target. And he was there always, watching, waiting, ensuring I didn't step into the wrong alley, didn't answer the wrong phone call, didn't blink at the wrong time. First, I resented it. The constant presence, the silence, the control. I was 24, a journalist with a shred of stubborn independence left, and suddenly, I was caged by a man whose entire existence seemed built around restraint and discipline. But resentment has a strange way of melting when faced with proximity, when fear and adrenaline mingle with something deeper, something forbidden. One evening, after I'd spent the day digging deeper into the senator's accounts, I left the office later than usual. Rain-slicked streets reflected the amber glow of streetlights, and I could feel the tension coiling in my chest like a live wire. I was soaked through, my coat clinging to my frame, hair plastered to my forehead. I should have felt alone, terrified, exposed. But I wasn't. He was already there. Leaning casually against a lamppost, shoulders relaxed but eyes alert. The rain made his suit cling in a way that was maddeningly perfect. I had no words for what I felt, and honestly, I didn't want to. Instead, I let the silence speak. You shouldn't walk these streets alone, he said, his voice low, steady, and somehow intimate despite its monotone. I've walked them alone before, I muttered, though my voice lacked conviction. Truthfully, I had avoided danger as best I could, but tonight, there was no avoiding it. Tonight, danger had come to meet me. He stepped closer, and for a fleeting moment, the world contracted to just us. The city faded into a blur of rain and distant lights. I could see the tension in his jaw, the slight quiver in his gloved hands. He wasn't just a bodyguard. He was a man balancing the precarious edge between duty and something else. You shouldn't have been at the office today, he said finally, eyes locking onto mine. I warned you. I have deadlines. I shot back, a weak attempt at defiance. But the words sounded hollow even to me. He didn't reply. Instead, his hand found my wrist, gripping firmly. Not painfully, but in a way that sent an unexpected jolt through me. The touch was electric, like static charging the air. And before I could think, before my rational brain could intervene, I let myself lean into him. Just slightly, just enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. And then the world shifted. The sound of footsteps echoed behind us, too purposeful, too heavy. I tensed instantly. He sensed it immediately, spinning me behind him in a protective stance. His body shielded mine, a barrier I couldn't have imagined without witnessing it firsthand. A thug emerged from the shadows, face obscured by a hood. He lunged, knife glinting, and then it all happened in a blur. A swift kick, a heavy fist, the cold precision of a man who had trained his entire life for this. Within seconds, the attacker lay unconscious, and my heart pounded in my ears. I stared at him, mouth dry. You could have killed him. His gaze softened for a fraction of a second, and I saw it's something human, something raw. I would have killed him if he touched you, he said simply. And that was the moment it hit me. Fear was no longer the primary emotion I felt around him. There was something else. Something deeper, more dangerous than the threats outside. Desire. Something forbidden but impossible to deny. Nights became even more intimate after that. Not in the way the world would understand, not yet. But the way we existed in proximity, in shared danger, in the unspoken need for connection. Every brush of his hand against mine, every time he adjusted the collar of my coat with meticulous care, every time he watched me sleep without ever saying a word, it spoke volumes. I found myself craving his presence in ways I couldn't articulate. When he was near, the world seemed sharper, alive in a way it never had before. And when he left, always reluctantly, always with one last lingering gaze, I felt an ache that was entirely mine. One particularly long night, after following a lead that had almost gotten me killed, I found myself cornered in a dim alley. My breath came in ragged bursts, and panic clawed at my chest. And then he was there, always there. He didn't hesitate. He pulled me into his arms, pressing me against him, and for the first time, I realized he wasn't just protecting me, he was claiming me. Not in words, not yet in actions, but in the way his body enveloped mine, in the way his scent filled my senses, in the way the world outside ceased to exist. Do you understand? He asked, voice low, trembling slightly despite the composure he always wore like armor. I can't let anything happen to you. I understand, I whispered, though my voice faltered. Part of me wanted to push away, to remind myself of boundaries, of sanity. But another part, a louder, more primal part, wanted to lean in, to let myself melt into him. He sighed, a sound so human it made my chest ache. His hand cupped my face, thumb brushing my cheek with deliberate tenderness. And then, impossibly, he kissed me. It wasn't soft. It wasn't tentative. It was commanding, possessive, a declaration wrapped in fire and restraint. My body responded instantly, instinctively, as if it had been waiting for this moment all along. Every fear, every tension, every boundary dissolved under the force of it. We broke apart moments later, gasping, foreheads pressed together. The rain soaked both of us, but we didn't care. For the first time, we existed outside of danger, outside of politics, outside of fear. We existed for each other. I began, but words failed me. How do you explain a lifetime of fear, a week of danger, and the sudden, terrifying realization that you were in love with the man who had hunted and protected you all at once? He shook his head, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Don't. Not yet. Not until we survive tomorrow. And survive we did. But the days ahead were relentless. The senator, a man whose corruption was now exposed in small leaks I had carefully released, was furious. Threats escalated, and the danger around me became more immediate. Each step outside my apartment required calculated caution, and each moment alone felt like a test of endurance. Yet even amid the chaos, we found moments of intimacy. A hand brushing mine as we walked through shadowed streets. A whispered word in the middle of a stakeout. A touch that lingered longer than necessary. A look that said everything we couldn't yet admit aloud. We were walking contradictions. He was my captor and my savior, the barrier between life and death. I was his responsibility and his vulnerability. And somehow, in that strange, dangerous dance, we found connection, trust, and love. The turning point came when I was almost cornered by two men who had been paid to silence me. He appeared in time, of course, and his movements were poetry in violence. Every strike precise, every maneuver calculated. By the time it was over, the men lay unconscious, and I was trembling, pressed against him. His arms the only thing keeping me upright. "You're reckless," he murmured, his lips brushing my ear in a way that made me shiver. "And I can't lose you. I don't want you to lose me," I whispered back, voice barely audible over the rain. And then, for the first time, he let himself show vulnerability. "I've always wanted you," he admitted, voice low, rough with emotion. "But it's never been safe. Not until now." I pressed myself closer, needing the warmth, needing the reassurance. "It's safe now," I said softly. "With me." For a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. The city, the danger, the senator, all faded into irrelevance. There was only us, pressed together in the rain, hearts beating in sync, bodies trembling with emotion and desire. That night marked a turning point. From then on, our connection deepened. We weren't just survivor and protector. We were partners in every sense. We shared strategies, fears, hopes, and dreams. We learned the nuances of each other's habits. The way a small gesture could speak volumes. The way proximity could convey more than words ever could. And slowly, imperceptibly, our love began to solidify, not just as passion, not just as attraction, but as something enduring, something that could survive the storms, the threats, the chaos. The city became our stage. Nights spent navigating danger became nights spent discovering each other, learning what it meant to trust someone completely. Touches, glances, moments of quiet intimacy became as vital as air itself. Every heartbeat, every shiver, every whispered word reinforced the bond between us. We were no longer just two men caught in a scandal's aftermath. We were two souls tethered by circumstance, desire, and an undeniable connection that defied logic, danger, and even the world's expectations. The days that followed were relentless. The senator's wrath had grown palpable. Threats came in waves, mails laced with menace, shadowy figures that lingered too long outside my apartment, phones that rang with no one on the line. I had become a chess piece in a game far bigger than I could comprehend, and the stakes were nothing less than life or death. And yet, amidst the chaos, there he was, always, my constant, my anchor, my bodyguard, my protector, my forbidden obsession. I had never known such contradictory feelings could coexist. Fear and desire, terror and comfort, danger and intimacy. Every glance he cast my way carried a duality I couldn't parse. Steel-hard resolve and a vulnerability he didn't or couldn't voice. We had grown closer in ways I had never anticipated. I learned to read the small signals he gave, the way his jaw tightened when danger approached, the way his eyes softened when he thought no one was looking. Every accidental touch, Every fleeting brush of his hand against mine was a silent confession, a piece of a language that didn't need words. One night, we found ourselves cornered in an abandoned warehouse. Shadows stretched long across the dusty floors, the air thick with tension. The senator's men had tracked me there, drawn by the documents I had leaked to the press. I froze, heart hammering, but he didn't hesitate. His body moved like liquid steel, every motion precise, calculated, lethal. I watched, transfixed, as he dismantled the threat with terrifying grace. And when it was over, he turned to me, rain-slick hair plastered to his forehead, eyes blazing. "You need to leave," he said, voice rough, almost breaking. "I won't let anyone hurt you." I nodded, too shaken to speak. And then, impulsively, dangerously, I stepped forward and kissed him. Not a soft, tentative kiss, but one filled with desperation, with longing, with all the fear and exhilaration that had been building for weeks. His hands gripped my waist, pulling me impossibly close, and for a moment, the world disappeared. We broke apart, gasping. I searched his eyes, looking for anger, for disapproval, for the cold detachment that had defined him. Instead, I found raw emotion, vulnerability, and then a whisper, so quiet I almost didn't hear it. "I've wanted this for so long." That night, in the dim light of the warehouse, we allowed ourselves to exist outside of danger. To exist as two people, not just survivor and protector. The world could wait. For those few hours, nothing mattered but the heat of his body against mine, the rhythm of our hearts sinking, the knowledge that despite everything, we were together. The following weeks blurred into a rhythm of tension and intimacy. Days spent dodging danger, nights spent in stolen moments of closeness. We moved like shadows through the city, always alert, always careful, but never without each other. His presence had become a necessity, as vital as air, as comforting as the softest blanket in the dead of winter. And yet, danger never truly left. One evening, as we walked through a nearly deserted street, I felt Ida prickle at the back of my neck, a sense that we were being watched. Before I could react, a figure lunged from the shadows, knife glinting. My scream tore from my throat, but he was faster. In a blur of motion, he disarmed the attacker, his movements fluid and deadly. He pressed me against the wall, body shielding mine, and for the first time I noticed the tremor in his hands. Not from fear of the threat had neutralized it, but from the intensity of the moment, from the sheer weight of caring so deeply for someone's life. "I can't lose you," he whispered, voice rough. "Not like this. Not ever." I clung to him, words failing me. The fear, the danger, the uncertainty, all of it melted into the simple, undeniable truth. I needed him. Not just as protector, not just as guardian, but as the man I loved. And then, just when I thought the night couldn't become more charged, he pressed a finger to my lips. "Shoo," he murmured. "Not words. Not now. Just feel." So I did. I felt the heat of his body, the steady beat of his heart, the brush of his lips against my skin. And in that moment, I understood the depth of what we had become. Not just survivor and protector, not just man and bodyguard, lovers, partners, something rare, something precious, something worth fighting for. The senator, however, would not let us be. The leaks I had released had shaken him, humiliated him, and he was determined to reclaim control. One night, as we returned from a meeting with a confidential source, I noticed the black SUV parked too close to my apartment. My pulse spiked. He noticed too. Without a word, he pulled me into the shadows, scanning the street. "They're watching," he murmured. "We need to move." We slipped through alleys, navigated backstreets, every step precise, every glance calculated. The city had become a labyrinth, a chessboard on which our lives were the pawns. And yet, even in the midst of this orchestrated chaos, our connection deepened. Later that night, after ensuring the coast was clear, he held me close in my apartment, the tension of the day bleeding away in the safety of his arms. "You're reckless," he said softly, pressing his forehead to mine. "But I can't help how much I care for you. I care for you too, I whispered. The words felt monumental, dangerous, liberating all at once. Days passed and the stakes escalated. The senator had mobilized his network, sending threats, hiring mercenaries, attempting to silence anyone connected to the leaks. We became fugitives in our own city, navigating danger at every corner. But every step, every heartbeat, every brush of skin against skin reinforced our bond. One afternoon, as we hid in a safe house on the outskirts of the city, we allowed ourselves a rare moment of intimacy. The room was dimly lit, the air heavy with rain and tension. He traced his fingers along my jawline, eyes intense, voice low. If anything happens to me, you need to know. I pressed a finger to his lips. Just don't think like that. We survived this. Together. He studied me for a long moment, then sighed, a sound that carried both relief and lingering fear. Together, he agreed. The following days were a blur of planning, evading, and strategizing. We coordinated with trusted allies, leaked additional documents to the press to destabilize the senator's influence, and carefully navigated the treacherous landscape of corruption and power. And yet, even in the midst of the chaos, our love flourished. Small gestures, a hand held too long, a lingering kiss, whispered reassurances in the dark became our sanctuary. We were two men against the world, bound by trust, desire, and an unshakable connection. The climax came one stormy night. The senator, desperate and enraged, had tracked us to a remote warehouse. We knew it was a trap, but retreat was no longer an option. We faced the approaching danger together, bodies aligned, hearts pounding, every sense heightened. The confrontation was brutal. Men armed, vicious, and merciless charged us. But he moved with lethal precision, protecting me at every turn, his body a shield, his instincts honed to perfection. I assisted where I could, dodging, strategizing, using every bit of information we had to outmaneuver them. In the chaos, I realized just how deeply I had come to rely on him, not just for protection, but for love, for guidance, for strength. And as he protected me, I realized something else. I would protect him too with everything I had. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last threat was neutralized. Breathing heavily, drenched in rain and adrenaline, we stood together amidst the wreckage, bodies trembling, hearts racing, eyes locked. "You're insane," he muttered, but there was a smile in his eyes, rare and fleeting. "And you love it?" I shot back, though my own lips curved in a grin. He stepped closer, hands on my waist, forehead resting against mine. "Yes," he admitted softly. "I love you. I've loved you from the moment I first saw you, and nothing will ever change that." Tears pricked my eyes, not from fear or frustration, but from the overwhelming rush of emotion. "I love you too," I whispered, "more than I ever thought possible." In that moment, the city, the danger, the corruption, all of it faded. There was only us, pressed together, hearts beating in sync, bodies trembling with relief, desire, and an undeniable sense of belonging. The storm outside subsided, leaving the streets glistening under the moonlight. For the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to breathe, to hope, to dream of a future unshackled by fear. We left the warehouse together, hand in hand, hearts aligned. The world still waited outside, full of challenges and dangers, but we faced it as one. And in that unity, in that shared strength, we found freedom not just from the threats that had stalked us, but from the doubts and fears that had once kept us apart. That night, we finally allowed ourselves to rest, safe in each other's arms. And as we held each other close, I realized that love, wild, dangerous, and all-consuming, had not only saved me, but it had given me a home in the arms of the man I had feared and desired in equal measure. The morning after our narrow escape, the city felt almost unreal. The rain had washed the streets clean, leaving them glistening under a pale, cautious sun. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of normalcy, a fragile, precious thing that I hadn't dared to hope for. He was still asleep beside me, body warm, steady, and impossibly real. I watched him, studying the subtle curve of his jaw, the rhythm of his breathing, the way his lashes cast tiny shadows on his cheek. After everything, the danger, the fear, the adrenaline, I realized I had never truly seen him like this. Vulnerable, untouched by the violence he wielded with such precision. Gently, I traced a finger along his arm, careful not to wake him, but unable to resist the need for contact. When he stirred, opening eyes that always seemed to see straight into my soul, I couldn't help but smile. "Good morning," I whispered. He blinked, then smiled a small, almost shy smile that made my heart skip. "Morning," he murmured, voice husky from sleep. "You're awake early." "I couldn't sleep," I admitted, moving closer until our legs tangled beneath the sheets. "Too many thoughts." "Thoughts of danger?" he asked softly. I shook my head. "No, of you, of us." There was a pause, heavy with unspoken emotion. Then he tilted his head, eyes searching mine, and the tension that had defined so much of our time together melted. "Us," he repeated. "Yes, I've wanted that word to exist between us for a long time." I cupped his face, thumb brushing along his cheekbone, and felt the warmth of his skin seep into me. "Then let it exist," I said simply. "Let it be real." It was real, and for the first time it didn't feel dangerous or forbidden. It felt like survival, like triumph, like the most beautiful truth I had ever known. Over the next few days, we began to reclaim fragments of normal life. I returned to work, cautiously, taking care not to draw attention, and he remained by my side, a constant shadow and companion. The city had calmed. The immediate threat of the senator's retaliation diminished with every leak, every revelation that exposed him further. And yet, despite the reprieve, our connection deepened. We explored intimacy not just in the heat of stolen moments, but in everyday gestures, coffee shared in the early morning light, walks through empty streets, hands brushing accidentally but deliberately, fingers intertwining until separation felt unnatural. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long amber shadows across the apartment, he surprised me. He had prepared a small dinner, simple but perfect: pasta, garlic bread, wine, and a single candle flickering on the table. "I thought," he said quietly, "we could celebrate surviving. Celebrate us." I felt my chest tighten. "Surviving? And us?" He nodded, eyes serious yet soft. "Yes, we've come through hell, and somehow, we're still here, together. I don't want to waste a single moment not acknowledging that." We ate, talked, laughed, a rare normality, a stolen peace. And when the meal was done, he reached for my hand, leading me to the couch. There, in the glow of the candlelight, he pressed his forehead to mine, and we let the world outside fade entirely. He began, voice low, "I've always wanted someone to trust completely, to protect, to love, to be with, without reservations. You have that now," I whispered, tears threatening. "With me." He smiled, brushing his lips against mine in a kiss that was gentle, lingering, full of promise. And in that moment, I understood the depth of our journey, not just surviving the senator, not just evading danger, but surviving the walls we had built around ourselves, the fears that had kept us apart. In the weeks that followed, life slowly returned to a semblance of stability. The senator's corruption was fully exposed, investigations ensued, and justice moved, slow but inevitable. I continued my work, my reporting no longer just a passion but a mission tempered by the lessons I had learned. About fear, courage, love, and trust. And he stayed by my side. Not as a bodyguard, not as a shadow, but as a partner. Our bond had been forged in fire, tempered by danger, and it endured. Nights spent in each other's arms became a sanctuary. Days shared became memories we built together. One evening, months later, we walked along the waterfront. The city's skyline shimmered in the distance, lights reflecting on the calm water. The air was cool, carrying the scent of the river, and for once, there were no threats looming, no shadows, no fear. He stopped, taking my hands in his. I've wanted to ask you something for a long time, he said, eyes searching mine, earnest and open in a way that left me breathless. My heart raced. What is it? He dropped to one knee, and the world seemed to tilt, as if gravity itself acknowledged the weight of the moment. Will you be mine, officially? Not just in stolen moments, not just in danger, but fully, entirely, without holding anything back. Tears blurred my vision, joy and disbelief mingling. Yes, I whispered, voice shaking. Yes, of course. He slipped a simple ring onto my finger, and the city seemed to cheer with us, the lights sparkling like stars celebrating our victory not just over danger, but over fear, over hesitation, over everything that had tried to keep us apart. From that night on, we moved forward as equals. We learned to trust not just in each other, but in the possibility of a life together beyond shadows and threats. Our love was no longer an urgent, whispered thing. It was a deliberate, proud, shared reality. We traveled together, exploring cities we had only read about, experiencing normalcy and adventure side by side. We celebrated birthdays, holidays, and quiet evenings where nothing happened except the pleasure of each other's company. Every day reinforced the simple truth. Love forged in adversity is unshakable. And through it all, we never forgot the journey that had brought us together, the fear, the danger, the moments when survival was uncertain. Those memories became a testament, a silent oath that no matter what challenges came, we could endure, together. Years later, sitting on the porch of the small house we finally called our own, he leaned against me, hand brushing mine, eyes reflecting the sunset. Do you remember the first night we were truly alone? He asked softly. I laughed, heart full. How could I forget? You scared the life out of me, and then kissed me like you owned my soul. He smiled, the kind of smile that made time slow. I did, he admitted, voice low, warm. And I still do. We sat in comfortable silence, the city and the past behind us, the future stretching wide and bright before us. We had survived danger, corruption, fear, and our own vulnerabilities. And we had done it together, no longer hunted, no longer bound by shadows, no longer defined by fear. We were simply two men who had found each other, and in doing so had found home. As the stars emerged in the evening sky, he pressed his forehead to mine, whispering, I love you. I love you too, I replied. And in that truth, in that shared heartbeat, everything felt right. Everything was finally, irrevocably ours. And so, our story ended not with tragedy, not with fear, not with lingering shadows, but with light, love, and the quiet, enduring happiness that comes from surviving everything and finding the one person who makes life worth every risk. We had survived the storm together. We had survived the world. And we had survived ourselves, together at last, finally free. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.